Great. So this is for you. So I want you to, I see you on a big screen. I'm going to look at you rather than the camera. But I would like this is for you. So please raise your hand if you have any questions, or maybe you could watch the chat. And,
yeah, we have a system. They usually can raise their digital hands, and I'll make sure to call them out.
Okay.
Or feel free to use the chat, and I'll pass the questions.
Whatever, but don't. Yeah, that's right. So don't hesitate. So here's what here's how I put this together. When I was asked to present to you, this field of managing innovation and creativity is incredibly broad. People have been studying creativity and innovation since Plato's time, 2000 BC. And so there's a lot we could choose to cover, but my filter was, I see you, and you should see yourselves as high potential future leaders. You're sitting where you are for a reason. And I've taught more than 80,000 students in my business school here at the University of Massachusetts, and it is surprising how quickly you will become managers. Right now you report to people and you have a boss, but before long, in a few years, you'll be having people reporting to you and they'll look to you for leadership. So I sort of thought the best place where I could focus would be, what's the most important thing you need to know so that you'll be successful when you're handed your first management opportunity. So I have control, right? Okay. So can you see these slides? Yes? Okay. So I want to start with a sort of depressing fact. And it is that for the last 250 years, that's the bottom axis here, the rate at which the human race, we in America, around the world, have been able to improve productivity has not changed. So in the United States, I say to American audiences, since American independence in 1775 with George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and all these famous figures, they were just as good as we are today at making things, at improving things, and at innovating. Now, we all think in this age of Apple and Google and that we're better than we're accelerating. There was a book written that was named the best business book in the world 5 years ago that said that worldwide the rate at which innovation has been happening has actually slowed down dramatically. And those of us in the field have sort of seen that. Now, so most organizations improve on the lower line there. Can you see my mouse if I move my mouse there? You see it? Okay, so I can use it. So you see the low line here. Most organizations improve, the average rate of improvement is between 1 and 2.5% per year. That's how much they get better every year. There was a recent study from MIT right before COVID that said that in the year before COVID, for the first time in history, US manufacturing had burst through 3%. So we are now 3.01%, and we're supposed to be all excited about that. What I'm going to be talking to you about here, so that's where the herd lives. That's where ordinary managers do that. And by the way, this includes the effects of technology, of automation, of all the millions of business school students that graduate every year around the world, more than 1 million MBAs that graduate around the world, all of the advances in continuous improvement. You've probably heard about lean and other things. That's all wrapped into that 1% figure. We're just not any better than we were 250 years ago. And yet, that's the end of the bad news. And yet, the organizations that I'm going to sort of introduce you to, but then focus on how they do it, are improving at between 10%, 12%, 15%, 17% on an annual basis, year after year. And I hope you all, appreciate the power of compounding. These are not actually in the real world. These are not straight lines. They're actually compounding exponential curves. Because when I improve 1% this year, and then I do another 1% next year, that's my first 1% is included in the second 1%. So it compounds. I'm going to focus today on this gap here. There's a number of things, but I'm going to focus on the single biggest thing, and it's something you can operationalize very easily if you choose to. I'd recommend perhaps that you do a little bit of reading, and don't just take this one talk with me, but I'll steer you to where you can read more about this, and then right out of the box, you can be a very successful manager that people love to work for and that is innovating and improving, in a standout kind of way. So that's what we're going to do. And one consequence of this, by the way, is that these methods here are proven. There are hundreds of organizations around the world that operate like this. It's just that the average operates like this. So it's your choice. Do you want to do that? And I assure you, life is much better when you're on that trajectory than this trajectory. Or do you want to do, just this? So here is the central fact that I'm going to sort of hammer on and develop throughout our time together today. And it's that when you are a team leader or a CEO, you are a manager and you have frontline workers, people who do the work of the organization. So in a restaurant, it's the people cooking the food and the people serving the food. In an airline, it's the pilots and the co-pilots and the flight attendants and the baggage handlers and the ticket handlers and mechanics, all the people who sit at the front of the organization, customer facing, who execute your processes on a daily basis to earn your money. They see a lot of things that their managers don't see. Now, the astonishing fact here, I'm sure many of you have heard of the Pareto principle, but it applies here as well in a funny way. 80%, when you're a team leader, you will have a position A. You start out with your team and here's where you are. Your restaurant's earning so much money, your football team's, only won a few games or whatever it is, and you want to get to position B. Of the ideas you need to get from A to B, 80% of them are in the heads of or potentially in the heads of your frontline people. That is a well-established and well-known law of continuous improvement. And by the way, the currency of movement, if I want to get from A to B, you need to talk about ideas. Everything around you, except perhaps the air and the trees outside your windows, is the skeleton. It's the bones of a previous idea. So the way you move from here to here is you get ideas from your people and yourself. 80% of what you need is in the heads of potentially in the heads of your frontline people. Now, how many of you have worked in a business before as a summer or a few of you have. Okay. So that, and just even watching the way businesses work, that most businesses are very top down, meaning that, there's a boss and the boss tells the little people how to work and the little people don't argue, they go do those things. And the human race has been really good at top down management. We just love it. We've had kings and monarchs and emperors and feudalism and slavery and serfs. We love telling other people that we know better than they do and they should do what we told them to. Now, what my message to you is here is if you have a dose of humility and can say, there's a lot of things that my frontline people know that I don't know, 80% of the engine to take me where I want to go is in their heads or potentially in their heads. Then you end up in a very different place. You improve much faster than somebody who's trying to issue all the orders and treat people as if they are slaves. Does that make sense? So one explanation of why this line is so low is that the world's predominant paradigm for thousands of years has been top-down management. And that does not engage the power of the front lines. These organizations, that if I were to put some of the people involved in front of you directly, they would tell you, this is what they do. This is their secret. And it's open, it's sort of obvious in common sense, but most people can't copy it. They fall back into these sort of bad habits. It costs you a lot. So there have been very few controlled experiments in management in the years. You know what I mean by a controlled experiment? You sort of divide a group into two and give these people a vaccine and don't give those people a vaccine and see who gets the virus. And if you've done it right, you get good information out of the differences in the groups. It's very hard to do controlled experiments in management because every company is different, every organization is different, they're full of different people, they have different histories, different cultures, they're in different places. So there's just too many moving parts to say, all we're going to vary is this one thing and we'll be able to judge the effect of it. But there are a few, and luckily for us, one of the controlled experiments is right in this space that I want to share it with you. This happened at Coca-Cola. Started in 2012, ended in 2014. And what happened was Coca-Cola, copying General Electric and Jack Welch, who was one of the most famous CEOs of all time, said, we are going to mandate that every Coca-Cola owned operation in the world, and it's a very big company, learn and apply Six Sigma. How many of you know what Six Sigma is? By show of hands. Few. Okay, Augustin, can you tell me what Six Sigma is?
Yeah, so Six Sigma, I learned this a couple of years ago, but I learned it on a subject of industrial quality. I think it's the translation. So it's getting a group of people trying to solve like a specific problem, giving a lot of resources in a limited time.
That's a very good summary. Yeah, it was invented in the 50s, branded Six Sigma in the late 80s. But what it is, and if in your careers you get a chance to take a course in Six Sigma, you should. It is it's a problem-solving method for teams to solve big problems. And you can imagine, I don't know what recent examples you've had in your part of the world, but I don't know if you heard of the Boeing disaster with its MAX 9, 737 MAX 9. Ethiopian Airlines crashed, and then an Indonesian Airlines crashed, and nobody knew why. The engineers didn't know why. The pilots couldn't explain it. So a Six Sigma team was put together of 10 people who had to go study, interview, get data, do tests over a period of months to figure out what exactly is going on. That's Six Sigma. Now, the important thing for our purposes here is that Six Sigma is a top-down technique. In order to release a team for months and give them resources, as Augustin said, management has to initiate that. It's not something I can just say, hey, I'm going to go off and solve this problem. My management, usually senior management, has to say, we need a team on this, and wow, we got to solve this problem. So down comes this mandate that everybody in the world in Coca-Cola has to study Six Sigma, team-based problem solving. Every site must conduct a certain number of Six Sigma projects and root out waste and excess costs and so forth. And unwittingly, Coca-Cola created this experiment in Coca-Cola Scandinavia, which has 1,200 people, serves 7 Scandinavian countries. And here's what happened. Down comes this mandate. So Coca-Cola Scandinavia started to hire consultants and do training classes and pick problems that were important. And at the same time, pretty much within weeks of that mandate coming down, this operation got a new managing director. And she had previously worked at a company called Scania. Have you heard of Scania before? I guarantee you at least half of you have seen a Scania product today. Anybody know what Scania does? Yes, Augustin again.
Trucks.
Trucks. They are not just trucks.
Yeah,
they do trucks that are individually customized to each customer. So they routinely win, engine size, mileage, rideability, everything. They routinely win awards for for being one of the more innovative companies in Europe. So she came from Scania, this innovative company, and naturally, if she comes from an innovative environment, what I'm really saying to you is that she came from one of these environments here. That's very, very, actually, I can tell you, Scania was improving when the last time I was there, they had been going at 17% productivity improvement every year. So 100 people this year can do the, they figure out how to do the work of 17 extra people by next year. That's a 17% productivity improvement. So she came from there. So naturally, she looks to the front lines for most of her improvement. So in she comes and she says, yeah, of course we'll do the Six Sigma. We've been ordered to do that, but you don't have a simple system to listen to frontline ideas and implement them, because that's where most improvement comes from. So at the same time that this mandate came down to do this top-down big problem solving, she also put in place a simple idea system to gather ideas from frontline people. So now we have some controls. Same company, same time, same employees, same managers, and you can compare side by side top-down improvement and bottom-up improvement, and look at what the data turned out to be. She actually got harassed by headquarters in Atlanta. This is her diagram she let me use. They said to her, why are you spending all this money on idea system training and telling people how to generate ideas and setting up all the software to handle ideas? And we told you to do Six Sigma. So she produced this diagram and tracked the data for a while just to sort of satisfy headquarters. And here's what happened. This is the data from the last year. She tracked it for 3 years until Coca-Cola in Atlanta kind of got off her back. In that year, as you can see here, they did, I think it was 4 black belt projects, and that collectively saved or generated 1 million euros. 1 million euros. They did, I think it was 11 green belt projects, a little bit smaller projects led by a Six Sigma green belt, and that saved or generated in revenue another 1 million euros. But you can see that the 2 million that was saved by, so sort of above this line here, that's what management saw. Management said, oh, we got to fix that. That's a problem. Below this line is the stuff management didn't see, but the frontline people saw. And so you can see that there were 9, and admittedly, each of these were smaller ideas, but there were thousands and thousands of them. And collectively, they added up to 9 million in new savings or new revenue. So when you do the math on that, 83% measured by Coca-Cola of their improvement came from frontline ideas. 17% came from the big stuff that management saw at its level. And I am telling you that is not, and by the way, the only thing that Coca-Cola learned from this was let Sweden do what they want to do. That's where they're headquartered. They never asked, well, how did you manage to design something that was 5 times better than what we instructed you to do? They just said, oh, leave Sweden alone. They know what they're doing. And here's another statistic about Coca-Cola Scandinavia. Coke measures its country units on 24 different measures. On 23 of them, this facility is number 1 in the world. The 24th is capacity, utilization, meaning what percentage of the capacity of their bottling and how they make Coke are they using? Well, because they're increasing their capabilities so fast, their capacity is going up, they can do more things. They're outstripping their ability to sell it because they're improving so fast. So on that one measure, they're not as good as the others. But on the other 23, they're number 1. And you would think that Coca-Cola in Atlanta would say, hey, what's going on there? We should figure that out, because if the whole company did that, we'd be in a different place. Here's some more data from some other organizations. The Coca-Cola, as I said, 83% bottom up, 17% top down. Technicolor, you've all seen. It is a television, it's a movie production technology. So older movies, they say filmed in Technicolor, but now if you go to a big, cinema complex, the Technicolor is what's projecting on the 16 screens, at different times and so forth. They track it. 81% bottom up, 19% top down. Management is not thinking of most of what is moving the company forward. The third one is a large U.S. chemical company. You've all heard of it. I'm just not allowed to name it. Going down this list, the bottom three are actually from innovation. I'm going to talk to you briefly about innovation in our time together, mostly about improvement, because remember, I'm aiming this talk at you in 4 or 5 years being managers. And if you can do this, what I'm about to show you, you'll be successful. And what it really amounts to is saying, I don't know everything. My employees are 80% of the engine for moving this forward. It takes a little dose of humility, but you all are capable of doing it. Bottom three on this list here, as I use the mouse, NAVSEA, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, JMA, these are innovation. And I'm going to, as I said, tell you more about them, but notice the numbers are the same there. Few innovations come from the top, most innovations come up from the bottom. So innovation and improvement, which is what leaders, if you're going to put your finger on the pulse of what you need to be doing, it's improvement and innovation. Most of it comes from frontline employees. The way we behave, the way we lead, you wouldn't think that was the truth at all. You'd think management was 90% and the employees were 10%. Okay, here's what it feels like when you actually get a company just on the improvement side that's really listening to its people and saying, we want your ideas. Anybody here from Sao Paulo? Nobody from, we don't have any Brazilians here?
We have 5, but I'm not sure they're from.
All Brazilians are not from Sao Paulo here? Okay, it's all right. Nobody's perfect. One company I'm going to talk to you about is in Sao Paulo, and I know that if the man who owns it is also a professor at your #1 business school called FGV. But I'll talk to you about that in a second, and he would love it if you went and said, could I see your company? So basically you see there's lots and lots of ideas. I'll do a couple of these. If you ever come to the United States and you do what's called an industrial tour, there are organizations that will set these up for you. They take you to leading companies and kind of, show you how they work. One of the places they would take you is the second one on this list. It's called US Synthetics. And notice 87 ideas per person per year implemented. That means that you have to kind of get used to this language. That means that 1.5 times per week or 2 times every 3 weeks, 3 times every 2 weeks, you're getting an idea that the company actually uses, right? So let me tell you a story that'll kind of illustrate the horsepower this puts behind you. US Synthetics is the reason why the blood diamond industry in Africa is in terrible trouble, and why De Beers and Belgium are in terrible trouble, because they can make perfect diamonds, or any diamond you want, they can make it for you. Very high-tech company. They're working with, fractions of pressures from the Big Bang and, temperatures of the sun to make diamonds. And they get 87 ideas per person per year. A couple of years ago, they invented a new type of ring, and it's called the Black Diamond Ring. Now, I was giving a talk last week and somebody was wearing one. Do any of you have a black diamond ring on? Okay, if you had, that would be easy, you just show it to us, right? But these, you might be thinking of a diamond ring as a band of gold with a diamond on top, but a black diamond ring is made entirely of black diamond. They're stunningly beautiful. And when US Synthetics invented this, it took 12 people working in 3 shifts around the clock, so 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, to make 1 ring. Now, after that group, just that one part of this large company, has been putting in lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of improvement ideas to make the process better. They make 3 people, and they only do 1 shift now, but 3 people, 1 shift makes 17 rings. And that was after 18 months. So you can see you're in a totally different place. And that's that high rate of improvement that I was talking to you about. So Karl Storz here is another one. They're one of 5 companies selected as very special in the United States. They make operating room equipment. By the way, just for reference, the average company, and I have been in all of your countries except Uruguay, and your situation is not much different than the United States. The average number of ideas in the United States we've been tracking for 50 years. It has not changed at all. It is the average US company gets half an idea per person per year. That's 0.5. You have to put a decimal point in front of this. That's 200 times less than what Boardroom currently gets, for example. So, so you have, so that's the state of the art in managing innovation and improvement is just way above the average. The other thing I want to make clear to you is these are not suggestion boxes. I don't know if you've ever encountered a suggestion box at work, please put this in a box, or nowadays a lot of people are putting them online. So you get online and you submit a problem and you say, I submit this. These are very, very different modern processes. They are nothing to do with what you might expect if you've had contact with this before. Brasilata is the company that's in Sao Paulo. Truth in Advertising, I've helped them, get to a lot of these companies, help them personally. And Brasilata is one of them. I spent a lot of time in Sao Paulo. 185 ideas per person per year, of which 92% are implemented. Those are staggering statistics. 3 ideas. They've got like 1,500 employees in 3 sites around Brazil, and they're all giving in 3 ideas a week that the company uses and puts in place. Clarion Hotels is one of the, it is, many people say, the best managed hotel in Europe. It is owned by the richest man in Scandinavia, Petter Stordalen. And if I were to put him in front of you now, he would say, this is what I do. This is my secret. Clarion Hotels has the highest sales per square foot of any hotel in Europe. So, something's going on there. I'll ignore the others except for ThedaCare down here. ThedaCare is that's the best healthcare organization in the United States for healthcare delivery. If you get sick or your parents get sick, and in the United States, if your chances of survival are much, much higher if you're with ThedaCare. That's also the best idea system in the United States. The second best system I've ever seen in the world for getting ideas is actually the Albert Einstein Hospital in Sao Paulo. They do a good job of listening to their doctors and nurses and improving things. But most hospitals are terrible at this. That's why it's very, very dangerous to go into most hospitals around the world. There was a Harvard Medical study that I like to cite a few years ago that showed that the risk for the average American hospital, if I get sick and I go into hospital, the risk I'm taking on is the same as if I base jumped off the Empire State Building 1 time per day. Base jump means parachute, I jump off the side of the building. So I'm taking on that risk when I'm in, the average U.S. hospital. Some are better, some are worse, than on a daily basis. So hospitals have a lot of problems, and part of it is they're extremely top down. Big doctors say jump, and the middle doctor says how high should I jump, and there's never any feedback going up the chain of command. Okay, why did that? Let me just now, I was here talking about the Clarion Hotels. I just wanted to show you what it kind of felt like, because I'm just, so far, I've just given you numbers, and I maybe felt like I've been waving my hand saying this is the greatest thing to do. But let me take you inside the Clarion hotels and just show you some of the ideas they got. This is from one of my books where we went in and took a team of 3 people, and we picked in this large hotel, 33 stories. It has 2 conference centers, 4 restaurants, 2 bars, a spa, a casino, big operation. We asked, which is the area in your hotel that has the highest rate of ideas? And they said, oh, it's the bartenders in the bars. So we went into the bar and pulled all of the ideas they had done in the previous month and got a long list, and I've printed about a fifth of it here. So the ideas I'm about to show you were from 22 bartenders, and it's about 1 week's worth of ideas. Okay, so imagine in the hotels you've stayed in, the environments you've worked in, I'd be very surprised based on global statistics if they were doing like this at this speed. So let me tell you the backstory to the first one. Marco worked in the downstairs bar, and I want you to think tinkly piano music and waiters and waitresses in tuxedos who are serving drinks at the table. You're not standing at the bar. And Marco said, you know, every hour we pour bottles and cans and Tetra Paks, and we build up this hamper of recyclables, and one of us has to take it down into the basement and sort this hamper into 3 different recycling streams. And it's not very pleasant work. None of us likes to do it. We take turns. And one day I was down there sorting these bottles, and I realized, oh my goodness, I'm right underneath the bar. Why not, and just read this first idea, get maintenance to drill 3 holes in the floor of the bar behind the bar, put pipes in so you can pour the drink and then drop it in the right pipe. And you go, there are lots and lots of leaders who would say, that's not what I want. I want the big dramatic stuff. I don't have time for this. Now I'm going to come back to why these are important, but I want to give you a feel for some of these. Here's another one of my favorites, 3 up from the bottom on this slide. Marin said, put an extra beer tap in the bar so that we can sell more beer right here. Currently, there's only one, and it's a bottleneck. So you're not even giving the bartenders enough taps to pull beer at the rate the customers are willing to buy it. Now, as you glance up and down this list, and by the way, you're going to get, Alejandro, you're going to send them copies of these slides, right? So you're going to get copies of these slides. As you glance up these, it is a litany of things that frontline employees, bartenders are seeing that their managers could never see because they're not dealing with the customers and serving the drinks. The other thing is, I don't want you to be impressed with this one list. I want you to be impressed with an organization that does this in reception. They have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner team in each of the 4 restaurants. They have a spa team, a housekeeping team, a security team. Every week they get together and they come up with these ideas to improve the hotel. And they do it all the time. And so the result is, from working at that fast rate, they make the highest revenue per square foot, or square meter, if you like, of any hotel in Europe. And Petr Stordalen, the owner, who started out as a receptionist, by the way, in one of these hotels, is the richest man in Scandinavia. So when you do this, and I said it's always better to be, you don't want to, initially you're not working as hard when you're down here, but so you got to work a little bit hard to get up there. But up here is much nicer, improving at a faster rate. You increase your opportunity bubble a lot. The set of things you can do, you have resources to do, it's much harder. Okay, now what I'd like to do is start to tell you I want to now justify this 80% and show you why this activity, which you can easily do when you have your staff working, you don't need your boss to give you permission. When you're the manager of a team, you can just do this without permission. But I want to share with you one of the findings of one of the actually the largest management study ever done. And this study was done in the late 80s, early 90s. It's called the Made in America study, as you can see here. And it was done by MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. At this time, US companies were being hammered by foreign competition, particularly Japanese. Japanese were landing cars that were better and much cheaper in California than we could make them for. In the electronics industry, textiles, paper, plastics, the US was just getting wiped all over the floor by this, well, what was happening? We don't know. So President Reagan said, I want a study done so that we can figure out what we need to do to get back in the game. And the reason why this was the largest study, it involved 600 researchers who went to 14 different industries around the world, and their job from mining to financial services, and their job was to figure out which country in the world this was a country level study, was the best at financial services, which country was the best at making clothes, which country was the best at legal services, that kind of thing. Where did the United States stand in that industry? Is another second item. And the third, which is where this comes from, is what, as we look at all of these 14 industries and all this information that's coming back from these 600 consultants, professors, business people, union people, government people who fanned out all over the world, what can we learn and tell American managers that they need to do as a whole? And this was one of the findings that came back, and it's again right in the space that I'm talking to you about. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to share an example that'll make it clear, I think, what's going on here. And my hope is that if you remember only a few things from this talk when you get your first management job, you remember that picture of the Koch pyramid and how what you do is at the top, but most of the action's below. And then what I'm about to tell you now, this is the other thing that's, if you get this, you'll be very successful if you apply it. Another area, just reading this slide, in which US firms have often lagged behind their overseas competitors is in exploiting the potential for continuous improvement in the quality and reliability of their products and services. So what we are not good at is constant, small, incremental improvement in the things that we do. We're not good at making our products get a little bit better every day. We're not good at getting our processes better every day. We're not good at that. Second sentence, the cumulative effect of successive incremental improvements and modification to established products and processes, so just making small changes but constantly to what you do, can be very large. And it may outpace efforts to achieve technological breakthroughs. In other words, if you do that incremental small improvement, like I showed you with the Clarion, it has a huge impact, and it's bigger than trying to hit a home run in baseball and get the big single innovation out. So what I'd like to do now is just tell you a story from my days as a consultant. I still do it, but earlier. Before I came to University of Massachusetts, I was at another university in Baltimore called Johns Hopkins. And I was sitting in my office one day. Baltimore is a port city. It's right near Washington, D.C. I was sitting in my office one day, and I got a call, and it was from the vice president of labor relations for a company called CSX. Has anybody heard of CSX while I sip my coffee? CSX. It is one of the world's largest logistics companies. So you may have seen Maersk They have container ships all over the world. CSX is their competitor. And they have container ships. They own most of the railway track in the United States, east of the Mississippi. They have trucks, they have ships, everything. And the person calling me was the head of labor relations for this company. And he said, we have a problem. I said, well, what's your problem? And he didn't want to tell me over the phone, but he said, just come down to our headquarters building tomorrow and I'll show you. So the next morning, I went to the headquarters building for CSX. And CSX is in Baltimore. This is something that, because, have you heard of McCormick Spices, the world's largest spice company? That was headquartered in Baltimore. CSX started out as a clipper ship company that would go out to the Far East and bring back all the exotic spices and things for McCormick. So they grew up together, and they both were on the dock side of Baltimore. So down I get to this new building, which is in the skyline of Baltimore. It's not their old building. And here's what I see: a 39-story building. And I hope you appreciate my PowerPoint artwork. Wrapped around the building, and this was in January, and it was very cold and windy, was a line of people waiting to get in the door. And I stood there and kind of wondered, what on earth is going on here? And this man came up and he said, introduced himself and said, this is our problem. And here's what had happened. As I mentioned, CSX used to have its main headquarters down on the docks. It was a ship, literally sailing ship company. They had a large building. It was 3 stories high and 3 blocks long and 1 block wide. And it was kind of grungy. And that's where they all worked. As CSX grew and globalized, they needed more space, and they also needed something that was befitting of a Fortune 200 company. So they bought this building, and previously, the building, it was a previously existing building. They didn't build it themselves. It had been designed for 1,500 people, mostly like wealth advisors and lawyers and low density occupation. CSX bought the building and put 9,500 people into it. And the one thing, they had more space in this building, more floor area, but they forgot about the elevators. This building had 8 elevators, and they were completely overloaded because they were designed for 1,500 people. And it resulted in average wait in the morning of 45 minutes to get in the door to go up to your office. Now, the reason why it was the vice president of labor relations who was contacting me was that the CSX had a policy that for every 5 minutes you were late up in the office, you would be docked 1 hour's pay. Very strict. That was actually from the old building, but they carried the policy over to the new building. So people would wait for 45 minutes on their own time. They would get in and they'd be a few minutes late. They'd get there 45 minutes early. No problem so far as the employees went. They just were annoyed. But then some supervisor would come along and dock them an hour's pay. So the unions were slowing down and starting to get, angry about this. So it was in fact a labor relations problem. So CSX had 2 options that it was thinking about. The first was to drill 2 new elevator shafts through an existing building. That's what those arrows mean up here. And to tack on 2 glass elevators on the outside of the building. So now, instead of 8 elevators, they were going to try to get 12 elevators, an extra 4 to solve their problem. They had already spent 6 figures with an architectural company, which was a lot more money back then than it is now. And they were well along in trying to make that happen as the solution. The other potential solution was another big single home run solution, and it was to move everybody back into the old building, sell this building, and buy one that worked. So they had 2 big options, I'm thinking back to that Made in America quote. And then somebody said, well, why don't we get some consultants in and see if they can kind of find some things to kind of soften the problem a bit while the big boys work out, the actual solution. So we were seen originally as lubricant to this, not as an answer. So we went in. I hired a team of 3 Hopkins undergraduates, and we just started work. And I want to stress to you here, I knew nothing about elevators. My undergraduate students knew even less about elevators than I did, but we did know one thing. And it's what my old Japanese teacher used to say. If you don't understand a situation, if you just watch it long enough, it will talk to you. So that's all we did. We just started riding the elevator system. And we wrote it for, we talked to people in the line down here in the morning. I just gave everybody freedom to explore. For 3 days, nothing happened. And then on the 3rd day, someone said, these doors, the kind of elevator doors that you get on the elevator and the doors, and you hit, I want to go to the 15th floor, and the doors stay open. And you hit closed door, come on. And you hit 15 again, come on. And then finally, in their own sweet time, the doors trundle close. You go, oh, finally, we're on our way. That was what this elevator system was like. And one of my students said, why don't we try to speed up the doors? And that was the best idea we had. So I called Westinghouse, that was the contractor for this elevator system and was aware of this problem. I was rapidly put through to a man who became my mentor on this project. And he was sort of the head of their elevator division. And he listened to me and said, he gave me one piece of advice. He said, there's a book about elevators that you ought to read. Luckily for me, I did read that book. I bought it and read it as part of this job. I'll come back to that in a second. But I said to him, we've been riding the elevators and these doors are really slow. And he said, oh, that's a good point. I will send you a couple of technicians tomorrow and they will speed up the doors. So do you know the kind of elevator system where the doors open and you get on and it hits you in the side and you go, whoa, come on, let's go. And the elevator's door is going, because it's raring to go. So we had to tell the technicians, crank up. Now you can't slam the doors shut because there's health rules that say you can't crush little old ladies and children in these doors. But it's surprising how much speed you can put in them. We told the technician, jack these doors up so that they are just aggressive and people have to hold them open rather than wait for them to close. And they did it. And every day, I should say, down here, if you can see my cursor, down here, we always handed people as they arrived a card saying, you got here at 7:10 a.m. And then when they got inside, right by the elevator, they would write with the provided Sharpie, they would write, I got on the elevator at 7:55. So we always knew how long the wait time was. That was our key metric. So after we fixed the doors, the next day, the wait time dropped to 41 minutes. And then one of the students was riding the elevators in the morning, about this again, probably another 2-3 days later, and needed to use the bathroom. So he got off on the 21st floor. I'm inventing these slight details here. And as he was looking around, where's the bathroom? He noticed that one of the 8 elevators was sitting with its doors open, with nobody on it, just sitting there. So he looked inside, and there was a master key. You know how building custodians and security guards, they have a master key, they can take over the elevator. And it was just turned to, out of service, wait for me. And so he waited there. And after 15 minutes, a man came down the hallway pushing a cart full of mail. And that's how we found out that CSX never had 8 elevators in the morning. They actually had just 6 elevators. 6 elevators. Got to get my hand right there. 6 elevators. I'm watching myself. I get delayed feedback. 6 elevators. Because 2 of them were taken out from 7:30 to 8:30 for the mail to be delivered, and it hadn't mattered in the previous building because people used the stairs and they had a lot, fewer people going up and down the elevators. So we got those 2 elevators put back on after a little bit of a fight. The wait time dropped to 34 minutes. And then I forgot to tell you that this company, being a logistics company, most of these 9,000 people had the same start time of 8 o'clock. They were supposed to be in the building at 8 o'clock because all these departments coordinated with each other and they couldn't let them be lackadaisical. They're logistics, right? With timers and switches and connections. So at 5 minutes to 8, one of my students made the mistake of getting on one of these elevators. And if any of you ever been, I used to live in Tokyo. If any of you ever been to Tokyo, you know that in the rush hour, they push you people on with poles because there's so many more people that need to get into the train than can possibly fit, that they actually push people on. Well, it was like that. People were crowding on because they had to get up because they didn't want to lose an hour's pay. And my student, see how I can show this to you. My student was, if this is the back wall right here, my student was pushed towards the back wall and smushed against it, and her nose was pushed against the elevator certificate. 9 days into this project was the first time we read the certificate that was posted in every elevator. And that's how we learned that the elevator was supposed to have 14 people on it. That's its capacity. Now, that's a little optimistic. It's like getting 19 people into a phone booth, but it made us count how many people are actually getting on these elevators. And we found our load averaged 7.1 person in the rush hour, half of the capacity of the elevator system. So I called my mentor and I said, how can we get more people on these elevators? Because they're going half empty, So he said, well, you need the company to, the CEO has to make an announcement. All department managers have to reinforce this in their weekly meetings. And I and my team had to stand outside. I hope you appreciate how this line is getting shorter. Had to stand outside and tell people, here's how you get on an elevator. And what you do basically, I can't move around here, but is doors open, you walk straight in, turn around, and put your purse, briefcase, umbrella in front of you. You hold it. And if people are trained to do that and then stand in the last available space, heuristically, you'll pack the elevators pretty full. So we worked on this for a few days, lots of announcements, emails flying around, and we managed to get the load up to not 14, but like 11.3 or something. So we're getting 4 more people per ride. The wait time dropped to 29 minutes. Then one of our students asked, why is it that the stairs are locked? So it turned out that there were 2, if you can follow my cursor, there were 2 stairwells, up one here, and they were locked. The only reason you would use them was in case of a fire. If you opened a door, an alarm would go off. Why can't we open the stairs so that people can walk up and down instead of loading up the elevator system? So it turned out the reason was that they'd done it was that in this section here down at the bottom was the National Operations Center for the U.S. railway system. So needed to be very secure. And the CSX security had just said, nobody in the stairwells. That's it. It's too dangerous. Somebody could burst in and cause an accident. Well, after reconsidering that and redesigning these doors a little bit and the locks, we opened the staircase. And in office buildings, people are very willing, when you don't get a lot of exercise, and as you grow up, so to speak, you're willing to walk quite a bit on the stairs. So, they would, the statistic is a lot of people are willing to walk up to 10 flights just to get exercise. But now, instead of people hopping on the elevator to go down 1 floor, they would just use the stairs. So by opening the stairs, the wait time dropped again. Then someone said, the kind of elevators that they come up to the floor, come up to the floor, and they kind of bump around. Then they sit there, and then the doors slowly open. That's what we were dealing with. We were closing the doors fast, but we hadn't changed the way the doors opened. And that's when we learned that in the United States, it's legal to start opening the doors before you hit the floor. 3 feet, 1 meter below the floor, you can start opening the doors. You can start opening the doors 1 meter above the floor, as long as they're not more than a certain amount open by the time you've leveled off. Yeah. So we I called the king of elevators again, and he sent some technicians down, and now the doors pop open very aggressively, much quicker, which saved like 3 or 4 seconds of stop, and the wait time dropped to 40 minutes. Sorry, 14 minutes. That was covered up by a thing here. 14 minutes. Then somebody said, why do we have the whole building starting at 8 o'clock? Can't we kind of spread it out a little bit? And so we did a simulation of the entire building, a computer simulation, and we could say this department starts 15 minutes early, this department starts 15 minutes later, and we spread it out by half an hour, and we could see the impact on the elevator system. And I could tell the leadership of this company, you know, they gave us certain constraints. We couldn't start this department after this department, and this one had to be done before that one. And we've met all those, but we were still able to get some departments to come in early, some departments to go late, kind of flex time, if you like. And the wait time dropped to 12 minutes. Another one, and I'm thinking of getting the idea here, was when I mentioned that I got that book from at the recommendation of this executive at Westinghouse. And I read the book, and buried in the middle of it was this discussion of a phenomenon that happens in skyscrapers, and it's called social interfloor traffic, and it's worse in the morning rush hour. And what it is it means that when I get to I get on the elevator, I go up to my floor. The first thing I do is I put my briefcase and purse or whatever down, and then I get back on the elevator system to go get a cup of coffee and talk to my friend for 10 minutes before we start work. The average skyscraper, 25% of the morning traffic in rush hour is social interfloor traffic, social traffic. So Westinghouse said, what you have to do, and we did this, is now in this building, there's a special button behind the lobby reception, and it takes this elevator system, a guard just flips it, and it turns it into rush mode. And what that means is that the only place the elevator system will accept instructions is down here. If you try to call an elevator up here, it won't come to you. If you try to jump on an elevator and hit the button inside that just happened to stop at your floor, it won't do what you said. The only place that you can tell an elevator what to do is down in the lobby, which means that when you fill an elevator, it basically goes up and then rushes down. So it's straight up and rush down. And we changed the modality of this elevator system to knock out, and of course we'd open the stairs, social interfloor traffic. The wait time dropped to 6 minutes. You getting the idea here? We're about, by the way, and where we ended up was 26 seconds. By the time we'd implemented about 15 ideas, it took 5 weeks, and we were down at 26 seconds. The problem was solved. And I stress, I knew nothing about elevators. My students knew even less. All we did was go in and watch and make lots of improvements. Now let's revisit the MIT study. And I just want to go to that second sentence, where I'm just watching my time here. Yep. Where it says the cumulative effect of successive incremental improvements and modification to established elevator systems, so lots of little changes, can be very large. And it may outpace efforts to drill 4 new elevators into the building, which is a huge, big technological improvement. So my message to you is when you're looking for change in your team, when you have your first management job, and I hope as you rise, you never lose sight of this, your job then is to enable it to happen amongst, through many layers of managers. I hope you'll take this to heart and realize that the cumulative power of lots of small ideas is deceptively small. You think it's very small, but in fact it's huge. And that's why many managers just aren't aware that this is the way to make things happen. So I want to just quickly go over why frontline ideas are so powerful. First, the people who work on the front lines, I think I demonstrated this with the Clarion ideas, they see a lot of problems and opportunities management doesn't see, because most of these problems are buried in the daily work of the company. They're just little inefficiencies that are just around, but there's hundreds of them, and they're buried in the way people work. It's not one big obvious thing. Second point, the nature of frontline ideas is surprising. Remember I told you about Marco's idea to drill 3 pipes in the floor and put the things through them? What I didn't tell you was that saved 7 minutes every hour, 18 hours a day, 365 days a year, forever. And when you add that up, that's, I think I did it just before I came here, 788 hours a year, just from that one small idea. But you don't see it all in one place. If I came to you and said, hey, I'd like to tell you something that'll save you 788 hours a year, you'd go, woohoo, that's amazing, that's weeks of work. But if I give it to you 7 minutes every hour and it's distributed across a whole work team, you don't see it. But when you get ideas that are used repeatedly, some of the ideas we've tracked are used more than 100,000 times a year. Small improvement, but McDonald's does this in 15,000 restaurants around the world every day. So you take out an enormous amount of overhead, but you don't see it all in one place, and so we don't notice it. As we also said down below, another reason for the power of frontline ideas is just their sheer quantity. There are so many of them that with proper training, leadership, and the right systems in place, that big bottom of the pyramid, you're just overwhelmed with incremental improvements to make. And then lastly, big ideas need small ideas to make them work. So if you have a big plan for your group, a big strategic goal or some vision, every big idea needs hundreds of small ideas to make it work. So and those all come from the front lines. So you've all heard of the Post-it note, 3M, the sticky note that you put on your paper. So the man who invented that, his name is Art Fry, and he's a very famous inventor at 3M. We interviewed him a few years ago, and he said, people study in business schools that 3M, the Post-it note, is a classic example of innovation. And Art Fry said to us, the Post-it note is one big idea and 256 small ideas. So they had the big idea to try, but then it took a lot of people, a lot of places to make the whole thing actually work. So if you are a top-down manager, you give up all of this and you're running it with not seeing everything and not knowing everything. And the people who do use this material, I'm gesturing at the screen here, are going to outstrip you. And that's really a big part of that secret that I was talking to you about. Okay. Have any of you heard of Lean before? You heard of Lean? So when you are in the working world, most companies use Lean as a improvement methodology that grew out of the Toyota production system. And I just wanted to sort of connect it to you. This is Toyota's current definition of Lean. It's the whole definition. It's not a clip or a footnote. You're doing Lean when your employees are problem solving and generating and implementing ideas that further the organization's strategic goals. So when you're doing Lean, it's all about the ideas from the front lines on a daily basis and as a matter of the organization's culture and the way it operates. Now, I see that not many of you have any direct familiarity with Lean yet, but this is not how most companies implement Lean. Lean is an idea generation schema. It's designed to get lots and lots of ideas from frontline employees, and that's the only way you can really get Lean. I won't go into any further since you haven't seen the bad side yet, but you will. I want to talk just briefly, finally, about innovation and how it's exactly the same phenomenon here. So once you get good at managing bottom-up ideas, you're also good at managing innovation as well. So we've been talking about improvements so far. An improvement is a change to something that you already do. An innovation is, so, they already pulled beer to sell to customers, an extra beer tap made it better. An innovation is when you do something totally different, totally new that you've never done before. And I want to share with you one of the largest studies of innovation that was ever done, which came up with this message. It was done by a colleague of mine called Sam Stern, professor at the University of Oregon. He was sitting in his office one day and he got a call from the Ministry of International Trade and Industry in Japan. And they said to him, "We are concerned about our country's ability to innovate. And we would like to hire you to come across and spend 3 years as a professor at the Tokyo Institute of Technology. We'll give you lots of funding and we'll give you staff, 25 people. And we'd like you to go out and study how Japanese companies, how innovation occurs in Japanese companies, and tell us how to get more of it." And so Sam agreed to go. He spent 3 years doing this study. And as you'll see, he's a very smart researcher in that he asks good questions. So first question when he arrived in Japan was, do you have any organization? I don't know what innovation's like in Japan. Do you have any organizations that give awards for innovations every year? Creative new business products and services. And in this country, we have the Fortune Christmas list, we have the Economist Technology Quarterly, the National Inventors Hall of Fame, National Medal of Technology. If you want to keep up with what's cool and new, there are places you can go where people have kind of, tracked that for you. My watch is dead. How much time do I have left?
About 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. That's fine. So Sam got a list of, they said, oh yes, there's these 4 organizations. I've put 2 of them on your screen, the Science and Technology Agency and the Institute of Invention and Innovation, 2 others as well, that give awards every year for new business products and services for their creativity. So Sam asked for a list of the previous 5 years award winners. And he got a list of 250 of the biggest innovations in Japan and most creative ones in the previous 5 years, 250 of them. So now we're completely at the opposite end of the creative spectrum. One of these, for example, was the Tamagotchi doll. Who recognizes the Tamagotchi doll while I get a sip of coffee? Anybody? What's the Tamagotchi doll? Vincente, they say you look like you know. What is it?
No, I'm just like trying to figure out what it, because I know like a Tamagotchi is like this little thing that's like a pet, right?
Yeah.
Which is like an electronic pet, but never heard about the doll though.
Well, they call it Tamagotchi doll, but you're absolutely
So
right.
that thing is the doll?
It's called Tamagotchi because inside it's a little rabbit or a little person, and it's electronic, and you're supposed to feed it and change its diapers and stuff like that. It's ironic that it's. I had 2 girls, and it's sort of aimed at pre-teenage girls, and they want to be like their mothers. And my 2 daughters just lived with things for a while. So that was one of these multi-billion-dollar innovation. And Sam sent his staff out for almost a year to track down every one of those 250 award-winning innovations and study how they came about, who invented them, get really good data on this broad set of innovations, everything from new drugs to toys to financial innovations. They talked not just to the person involved, but to the product development department, to R&D, to their boss, to their coworkers, and lots of great data. And when these people, Sam asked a question, he didn't gather the data himself. When he got all the data back from his researchers being out all over Japan, he noticed that the majority, that's the bottom point here, the majority of these innovations had started on the front lines. They were bottom up. They were frontline ideas. The next thing Sam did was he put together a panel of 6 vice presidents of large Japanese companies. So the head of R&D for Toshiba was on this. The head of operations for Canon was on this panel. He wanted people with perspective on big innovations and how they impacted large companies and countries. And he gave the panel 30 days, and they went down each of these 250 award-winning innovations, and they assessed them on a scale for their novelty and their impact. When the panel reported back, Sam now had the panel's estimate of the novelty and impact of these 250 massive innovations. How new was Tamagotchi? What was its impact? It turned out, as it says up here, the novelty and impact of the bottom-up projects, translating from his language, far exceeded the novelty and impact of the projects that had been initiated by management. So if you want novelty and impact, you had to go to what's coming up from below. Then the last part of this was, to me, the most subversive. I personally would never have thought of doing this. But Sam went back to each of the companies. Remember, there's a list of 250 award-winning projects. He went back to each of the companies where that had happened, and he asked them, could you please identify another new product or service that was commercially successful, so it made money, but wasn't particularly creative? So now each company had 2 items on the list, one set for highly creative award-winning projects, and then another project that wasn't quite as creative, but still profitable. Sam was trying to control for creativity and innovativeness. That's for everything except that. So, when the companies gave the innovations back, and Sam could analyze it, it turned out, as it says here, the award-winning new products and services were far more likely to have come from the front lines. The boring, safe innovations were far more likely to have been initiated by management. So the lesson of this is that the bottom up, meaning that look to the bottom of your organization, look underneath you when you're a manager for innovation. And your job, you're still important. Nobody's saying managers can't think and aren't smart. It's just that the people beneath them have the specific knowledge needed to bring about these innovations and improvements. So a smart manager doesn't try to do all the thinking for themselves. What they do is they try to enable their frontline people to come up with these ideas and be heard. Does that make sense? I think, so there's a famous law in innovation that says that it's from a man called Curtis Carlson, and it says top-down innovation is orderly but dumb. What that means is when management wants to do something, they need all kinds of cost-benefit analyses and strategic reports from consultants, and so it's very controlled. They feel super safe, but it's pretty stupid innovation. It's not really very creative. Bottom-up innovation, on the other hand, is completely chaotic because from the management's point of view, you don't know what your frontline people are going to say next week. When the Clarion managers come into an idea meeting, they have no idea what the ideas are that the frontline people saw that they didn't see. Oh, the bar, the beer tap. Oh, drill the pipes in the floor. It's like, whoa, but it's super smart because it's right on the front lines and it's done by people who are, who are there and they're thinking. So bottom-up innovation is chaotic, but smart. And I think that's my presentation for you. We have time for questions?
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Oh, yeah, okay.
A couple, 3 questions.
So go ahead and hit me with your questions however you would like. I will do my best to answer them.
Hello, Alan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to-
I would like to ask you, which are the secrets, let's say, to motivate people? Because we know it's very difficult to have people cooperating on this type of programs.
Okay. It's a great question. I'm often asked to help companies that say my employees are not very creative. They're out for themselves. They're not really feeling part of the company. When I go talk to the employees, I find that the management is the problem. The bosses are bullies. They're mean. They're bad listeners. And then so the employees the ideas are voluntary. You can have some ideas for me. I can have some ideas for you. But unless I want to, or you want to, you don't have to say them to anybody. They just sit in your head. So what you need to do is, so this actually, all of this bottom-up stuff is more a transformation for management than it is for employees. There's a famous, the most famous book ever written on creativity. It's called The Act of Creation by Arthur Koestler. And he wrote that in the hierarchy of human needs, the most important is food, water, and shelter. That's what we seek first. Then reproduce, then creativity. People have a powerful drive to be creative, and we want to do it. Why do people spend 30 years writing a book? Why do people spend 10 years building a boat? Creativity is what we live for. So it's more like managers are in the way than the employees are the problem. So I have worked at some very demoralized places. I've been hired by unions, and I go and talk to management and say, you're the problem. And as soon as management says, we would like to listen to you and tell us your ideas, they have no trouble getting ideas.
Hey, hi, Alan.
Hello.
So my question is like, how real is what you talk about? I mean, you mentioned like, if you're a top-down manager, just give up everything and accept that you don't know everything. And like, I agree with you, and perhaps it's the best way to manage businesses, and that we should apply like strategy making like democratically. But sometimes like senior managers are reluctant to give up their monopoly of decisions, and sometimes those elites want to shape the agenda. So how do you convince them to start delegating the decisions?
That's a great question. I'm not trying to tell them to delegate all decisions or that it's a democracy. What I am telling them is if they want to improve their company's performance, the employees have a lot of great ideas for how to do that. So you're absolutely right. This starts with training of leadership. So I don't know if any of you, how big an event this was in the world, but do you remember 6 months ago when a large apartment building, a condo in Florida, in Miami, just collapsed?
Yes.
And there were hundreds of people trapped. Yeah?
Yes.
So 2 days later, I was called by the largest condo builder in Florida saying, we need your help. And they realized that their buildings had a lot of problems in them. And the problem was that their frontline people were completely alienated and building very bad stuff. How do we fix it? Now they're open. And I said, well, let me train you. And exactly the case you've heard. I spent a day and a half with them in a room saying, there's the old way of doing it, which doesn't work. It didn't work for you. Your building fell down, But then there's a new way where you can actually dig out all the real problems and solve them. And people are intelligent, just like you guys are. You hear this. It's just that they don't know. They don't know any better. So they need some education and some training. And then they go, that makes sense. When you say how real is it, the best companies in the world operate this way. So there's hundreds and hundreds of good companies, but millions and millions and millions of mediocre and poor ones. That's the problem. So you have to educate them, but there's plenty of role models to show them.
So you think like the solution is to educate, and that will be like a long-term process?
No, it's whenever, it depends what level you're talking about. Changing the whole world, probably it's a long-term process. We have lots of processes in the world that, poverty and racism, they're going to take a long time. And what's the process by which you make them better? Where I come in is where the leaders of a company say, I'm stuck. I don't know why we're not doing what we need to be doing here. Help. And then I come in and say, well, the reason is you're looking in the wrong place. And they go, oh. So I work more company by company than trying to change the whole world, because a lot of people, as I've said earlier, are top down in nature, and they think that's the best way to be. Arrogance is a real liability in my space. It means that people are saying, I can't listen to you because of things going on in my head. I think I'm better than you. So naturally, to Octavia's point, they're going to feel demotivated and not say anything. So it's a matter of education, but it takes a year or two for senior leadership of a large company to kind of turn things around once they understand what they have to do.
Yeah, so I was thinking about like the paper of Gary Hamel, which is called like strategy as revolution, that talks about it. But like Hamel presents the idea of like we have to fight to change the system. So employees on the front line has to be like the opponents of the CEOs and the lead. So instead of educating the leads, they were like, well, we are fighting.
Yeah, Gary Hamel's not really an expert in this material. He's more of a strategist. So I know him, but to make a company improve faster, this is what you need to do. He's talking, so when from the outside as a strategist, yes, it does appear like labor management are in conflict, and they certainly are when top management and middle management is saying, we're not going to listen to you. I work with a lot of big companies, and they take cultural surveys of their employees, and the employees say, we hate working here because management doesn't listen to our ideas, we don't feel valued. That's going to feel from the outside to like conflict. But it really isn't once management realizes if I just change my behavior a bit and put in some training and systems, I can change this whole picture. Does that make sense? So Gary Hamel's looking at those 1% companies is my bet in that, and he doesn't see the very high performing improvement ones, which are operating totally differently, would be my take on that. But I don't know what he had behind that remark.
Okay, thanks.
And in your opinion, which is the best way to collect all this information? Because you talked that this woman in Coca-Cola kind of create a software, but if I understand well, Clarion has like weekly or monthly meetings to collect all the ideas.
Yeah.
So which is the best way to?
That's an excellent question that takes, normally when I work with companies, I take about 6 hours to explain that, because you've asked a big question. It's a process. It's like saying, how do we cure somebody from cancer? And I go, well, it's simple, do the, so there are processes that you use. Most of them today are team-based processes, where on the front lines for the improvement side, you have an idea board and people post problems and ideas and opportunities on the board. Once a week you meet, you discuss them, you decide what to do, you assign responsibility to people in the team, they go away, they do it, they come back the following week. So it's like running a project board based on actions that the team has discussed from, but now you have to do that across 300,000 people. Where did Anna go? Oh, there she is. You jumped 4 slots to the right. So now you have to make that happen across a large organization. Scania has 12,000 people, so they might have 600 idea teams, and a team might have an idea here that could be used here. And, some ideas might need approval from upstairs. And so you put in place all that system and some of that software. But at the frontline level, it feels like, and this is where you should start, put up a board or a flip chart, collect people's, what's our problems? What are the things we can do stuff about? And just start chipping down that list. And before you know it, you will have made a big improvement. That's literally all we did at CSX. We didn't even have a flip chart. we just said, let's go find the problems and do what we can, you know, and it's just remarkably powerful.
And there's one I missed on the chat, so let's make this one the last question. So from Paulo Bento from Brazil. In your presentation, you make comparisons between between US companies and Japanese companies. Do you have the same comparison between US and China companies?
I've worked a lot in China, and I've only ever seen 2 Chinese companies that did this well. A very funny story. In 2003, I had a friend call me because in China, the first time I ever spoke about this in China, I had secret police following me around because it's a message saying, listen to the ordinary people. They don't like that over there. And these 2 secret policemen we got quite friendly, so it wasn't threatening. I just knew I wasn't supposed to say anything that was too crazy. The Chinese manager said, this will never work in China, never work in China. We're very top down. Most Chinese companies are run by, if they're privately held, are run by grandpa or grandma, and it's like the U.S. military. You know, you just always do what grandma says. And then, so I've been looking for. I've advised a lot of Chinese companies about related things, and they're curious about it. But then in 2003, so a long time ago, I had this excited call from a colleague, and he said, "There's a little company in Hangzhou, China, that's just as good as, you know, Brazilata and these other companies. They're just amazing, a number of ideas." And so we just that this is a real find. Taiwan is a different story, by the way. Lots of companies do this in Taiwan, but mainland China. So we jumped on a plane within 72 hours. I flew out to Shanghai. I came back with the same crew that flew me out. I went for 12 hours down to Hangzhou, studied this company. The company was called Alibaba, and it had just a few hundred people. And then you go, okay, you know, they've been moving like this. And then there was one other company as well called Lenovo, where I've seen this, another very successful company. But generally, there are some cultures where still age and seniority trump everything, and it's very hard to change. But if the older grandma gets it and wants to improve it's easy for them to do it. But they just, at the moment, that's not culturally something they want to hear.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Alan. If everybody can join me in a quick applause for Alan's presentation today.
Thank you.
There's some good comments on the chat. Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you, Alan. This is an amazing presentation.